So today I have yet another special guest. We've known each other for like 10 or so years.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she's a good friend, even though we don't really see each other that often. When we do meet and when we do connect, it's like nothing has ever changed. It's Dr. Renée Purdy. In today's conversation, we're going to be talking about fear, like the topic of this series, but with Renée's perspective, personally and professionally. So introduce yourself.
Sure. Thank you so much, Natalie, for having me today. Um, yeah, I've been thinking about this topic for a while since you asked me to talk about it. My name is Renee. I'm a naturopathic doctor. I've been working for a good 10 years now. I'd say I've been in this profession. And it's, as we were saying earlier, I've definitely grown into my profession. It's how I work now, how I practice now is very different than how I started. And it's been a journey based on my own understanding, my own studying, researching, learning, curiosity, my own healing journey as well. So it's definitely, yeah, and it's just still changing.
Yeah, always evolving, always
Always
evolving.
evolving, always
Yeah,
evolving. Yeah,
but that's a really important point to bring up because you're never gonna get never gonna get sick of doing what you do because you're allowing your practice to evolve as you're evolving, and that's really important.
exactly. And I feel really fortunate to be in this kind of profession that is very broad. It's not right. There's a lot of flexibility of how it can practice. Medicine is also an ever evolving field, right? So where I started working more like really in the body with physical things, healing physical things has really evolved with where my interests have gone and where we're seeing more and more information and more and more talk about, where I'm going. My interest has definitely shifted more to a mind body approach, and it's really nice that this is now a lot more. We talk about it a lot more. Um,
Yeah,
it's yeah, so I feel fortunate that I'm in a profession that definitely allows me to kind of take it where I feel I is
aligned with
important
you.
or right aligned with, yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's perfect. Yeah. So from your standpoint, from your both professional and personal point of view, how do you see and with yourself and with your clients that your patients, how does fear impact our lives, our bodies, and just our well-being in general?
Yeah. Oh, huge question, right? Huge topic.
Yeah.
um,
Like I said, our conversation could be a four-part
yeah,
conversation.
I think it needs to be so.
Yeah.
In how I see it impacting myself and my patients, I think it's kind of like fear presents in that way, in right, kind of in that spectrum of anxiety. It's that
Hmm.
fear, worry, anxiety. And I see it in myself, in my patients, in coming up in fear of the unknown, fear of change, fear of what's going to happen. In my work, for example, I work with people who come in with different health concerns. Sometimes it's fear around, what does this mean for my future? What does this mean for my health? Or fear around changing. We need to change these things that you're doing, your diet, your this and that. There's fear around that. For myself, it's fear around making certain decisions, right? Will people like this? Will this fail? Will this, right? So fear presents as this emotion that I think, right, on that spectrum
Yeah.
of anxiety. So it's
Yeah.
something that definitely we run into it every day, and we don't necessarily acknowledge it. Oh, that's a fear, but I definitely see it come up in every single conversation that I have with people in different ways. It's gonna come out. We're gonna say it in different ways, express it in different ways. But if we were to take that conversation that way, I think we would kind of uncover that, okay, maybe there's a fear there. Maybe.
Yeah, I love that you touch upon that. Fear can be anxiety because usually, and in today's day and age, and it's totally fine, we're more comfortable with anxiety.
Yeah.
and fear is still like, oh, like
Yeah.
fear.
Yeah.
So where anxiety is more like, okay, I can deal with that, but it's
Just my anxiety, right? I think it's like for me, I really what helps me understand it is that anxiety and fear are on the same spectrum of the same reaction that our subconscious brain has, our autonomic nervous system, right? That it's something that we feel in our body.
Yep.
When we have a fear, say like I have a really immediate fear. There's I don't know, there's a fire I need to get up. I'm going to have a fight or flight response. I'm not going to be thinking like, oh, did I have lunch? Maybe I should have lunch before getting out of the house, right? It's an automatic reaction that we have, adrenaline, right? And it's a survival instinct.
Yep.
It's an immediate reaction. That's what, like, biologically, that's what fear is. And we feel it in our body before we're going to think about and reson and like kind of think about and kind of put a story to it. We're going to feel it in our body. Anxiety is a little, right? It's on that same spectrum. We feel the same thing. It's the same hormones, right? Adrenaline, cortisol, is the same physical reaction. It's just there's the stories up, maybe the stories maybe a little bit more elaborated around it.
so
Right.
anxiety would be like us staying in that fear mode for
Yeah.
a long period of time. It just like kind of transform into anxiety.
Yeah, it can, or it's going to be, for example, we can see it like a good example is someone who has a car accident.
Mm-hmm.
There's a fear response with the car accident, but then there's an anxiety that develops around driving, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
That trauma that that person has until it's resolved, they're going to have anxiety around driving. So it's kind of like the brain feels, oh, that's dangerous. I'm gonna prepare you for that reaction because I don't know, right? So that anxiety is kind of like a preparation of a potential
Danger.
danger, exactly, dangerous situation.
This is so juicy. This is such a good conversation. I'm really loving this. Yeah. Oh,
So it kind of changes our perspective around it a little bit, right?
yes.
Fear is actually a survival instinct. If we didn't have a fear response, the human species probably, right? We wouldn't be here right now if we didn't learn that fire, right? Fire is dangerous. So fear is really, it's a survival response, except animals are really good at having a fear response. There's, okay, you're an antelope in the savannah. It's a classic example that's
Yep.
used, right? A tiger or lion comes along, fear response, there's a reaction. As soon as that antelope is in safety, fear response shuts down, then they go back to normal. It's on or off.
Yeah.
As humans, our imaginations, all right, are really good. So we're not necessarily that's not necessarily gonna turn off.
Mm-hmm.
And develop more, right? More
Yeah.
complex.
Yeah. The conversation that I did with Heather Drummond, we touched upon our physical body as soon as we're out of that as soon as our body should have the permission to relax once we're out of danger. There's like these natural tremors that usually happens, and we can see with animals, horses, dogs, birds, all the animal kingdom. They all do it as soon as the antelope, the deer, as soon as they're out of that danger mode zone, they release, they shake, or they'll roll around in the dust or on the grass. Whereas we just tense up and then just build up on those.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And then maybe we run into different problems. And I think this is where the mind body connection in terms of health comes in. When we're talking, I feel that this recently has become more, over the past couple of years, has become more to the forefront of books, or more people. We talk about it a lot more and a lot more openly, and it's a lot more accepted. There's more and more research going this way.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll see chronic disease, or people who have symptoms that don't respond to regular treatments, or just, we can't figure out what's wrong with you, autoimmune conditions, right? That's where we see more of that mind, body, where something happens, we have some sort of reaction, our body sticks in that, right? That something sticks in that fight or flight or freeze response, and it kind of translates to our body and reflects as symptoms.
Yeah.
That we can't explain. Why did you develop this? Don't know. Genetics, your diet, your like, right?
Yeah.
Unresolved, right? Unresolved stressors or fear responses or traumas that, right? That are coping mechanisms. Yeah.
Yeah, and we were talking a little bit earlier before we started recording about genetics and how that has an impact too. So you wanna kind of elaborate a little bit on that aspect.
Yeah, so genetics is a really neat and growing field also. So genetics, right? We know genetics. Oh, we did get our genetics from our parents. Why we look a certain way, or why we're right, why we might be predisposed, and we use genetics where we might maybe predisposed to certain conditions. And then we talk about epigenetics, where it's all the other factors that are going to impact how our genes might affect or not affect us. Epigenetics, we're talking about lifestyle, we're talking about diet, we're talking about our environment, we're talking about our own kind of life journey. Genetics is how we're programmed. So genetics, we're going to inherit it from our parents, our grandparents. And as far as I've read, and this might have progressed since I last read about it, but we're going to inherit traumas are going to impact our genes. So it's going to change how not the gene, but how our genes are turned off, on or off. And it's going to impact for at least 7 generations. There's a really good book by a naturopathic doctor. Her name is Nicole Redvers, and she's done a lot of research with First Nation communities. And right, so she's done a lot of research around this and seen where like anxiety, depression, diabetes, different conditions are more prevalent. And she's kind of made the link between trauma, how it impacts our genes. So we're going to see this in our predisposition to certain health conditions, but certain reactions. And we mentioned the cat videos, right? Which I think are a really good example that most of us have probably seen these videos. Yeah. But it's the funny cat videos of when you put a cucumber beside a cat, and the cat like kind of has this like fear response when they see the
cucumber.
If you haven't seen it, check it out.
Check it out. It's hilarious.
There's a ton of them on YouTube, but then they float around social media all the time. Yeah. But it's the cat isn't actually scared of the cucumber. It's a genetic survival response that the cat has to the cucumber looking like a snake. So when we see something, if the cat thinks this is a snake, it's not going to stop and look, oh, that's not a snake, okay, I'm safe. No, it's going to have that survival instinct. That's programmed genetically, right? And we were saying, like, we've tried it with our cats. One of your cats had that response, one of them didn't. My cat didn't. So is this part of evolution, right? Is this part of how, okay, cats have been domesticated for a while. There's not that, they're not living in the wild where there's the danger of a snake, right, biting them. So they maybe no, that's not needed anymore. So when we think sometimes why do I have this fear? Well, why do I have this? Why am I this way? Well, maybe it's that's what we call transgenerational components of our health or of our personality or certain traits that we have, right? We'll often say like, oh, you're just like your grandmother, you're just like that's a big part of that. That's part of genetics.
Yeah.
Also, and we'll see that in repeating patterns, right? We'll see patterns repeat from family to family based on traumas or events or things that haven't been healed.
And we can we can label them as like family traits, or like, oh, that family line traits is really,
Yeah,
really strong, but it's like just like a big trauma energy ball stored within the DNA. Yeah.
exactly, right? Like we're not born an empty slate, a clear slate, an empty bucket. We're born carrying these things from the previous generations.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And when you do connect mind body energy, what happens? Like how is somebody able to, and not just wait 7 generation until
Right, which might not even be.
yeah. So, but
Yeah.
for me, like that 7 generation, it for me it just confirms that okay, there is a natural flow of evolution of all different species, from humans, from cats, from whatever, and that's natural. But we do have a certain power and a certain ability that we can, like,
Yeah.
quote unquote, heal from either something that happened in our life or just within the genetics. How do you see that?
I think we definitely have the ability to do that. And I think we're so if it's 7 generations, I don't know if it's actually 7 generations. I think that's as far as it's been kind of traced. 7 generations is a long time ago. So it's probably even longer, right? There's survival instincts that we still have from, right? Like caveman, if we want to call it that. There's instincts that we still have from that. Like our brain really hasn't evolved. So that survival instinct, that fight or flight, like that's where it comes from, and we haven't evolved from that. So I think there's things that, I don't think we will necessarily, right? I don't know.
Yeah.
Or certain things, but can we heal from these? Yeah, I think we can. And this is a field that I'm learning about and exploring about, so I'm definitely in that learning, right, in that learning process, and I think it's fascinating. But when we look at these, right, we're going to carry wounds and traumas from previous generations. How can we heal them? We can heal them sometimes by, I think there's different therapies or different tools that can be um, used for this, and there's a lot of them that are effective, and most of them are ones that are going to get us out of our thinking brain and into our subconscious brain, where we're going to, most of us need that kind
Mhm.
of approach to healing, because if we talk about it, we can understand it. Most of us aren't going to heal from that. We're going to understand it. It's going to, oh yeah, that makes sense. Okay, I get it. Yeah, that's why that explain. I get it. That makes sense. Um, but we need to get out of our own way, kind of thing, for it to heal it on a deeper level, understanding it, identifying patterns, understanding. Yeah, okay. There's a lot of illness in my family. Oh, there's a lot of trauma in my family. And if we ask our parents or our grandparents, if we're able to, or aunts, uncles, people who know more about family history, we can learn a lot from that. Oh my gosh, like I didn't know that my family had this, had been a story in my family, if this had happened. And it can help us identify things. Oh my gosh, that pattern is repeating. And then when we can go into, my interest is, okay, well, how can we heal this? And often it's going into the, like, therapies that can access the subconscious brain to heal them. There's a lot of different ones that
Mhm.
can be effective, and different people will respond to the different ones.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, and just for example, like breast cancer, like it is in my family. It is from on my mom's side, well, both sides, but it's genetically passed from mothers to daughters. And when I was on my self-discovery journey, and it kind of, it hit like this little bell that was like, okay, oh right, that's right, like this illness is supposedly part of my genes. I'm gonna go explore what that is. And I was, funny enough, I had a client was struggling with breast cancer. Well, she was during treatment, and so we explored that, and that through her her experience and through exploring with her, it helped me put more words into what that actually is, and it's within our breast. And for women, that's the whole nurturing aspect of our feminine body and the feminine energy. And so, but it just got my interest really peaked in, okay, that was personal for me because I don't want to live that. I want to be able to and not pass that on. And I'm not carrying kids, so it won't pass on, but just still having that within my body. So how would you see that? Like it's something as tangible as breast cancer being passed on from generation to generation.
Yeah. So there's like the genetic part where we're going to see people who carry a certain gene for breast cancer, the BRCA gene, BRCA. So that's like a gene that has been identified as being like linked with breast cancer. So women who have this, or men, but it's very, very rare, but men can get breast cancer too. So women who have this gene have that risk of developing breast cancer. That's the genetics part of it. The epigenetics part of it is you carry the gene, but it doesn't mean you're going to get breast cancer. It doesn't mean all of the conditions are going to be set for you to develop breast cancer. Right? And then, so we have to look, and then, right, we're going to talk about a lot of things, but if we keep it like in the fear conversation, I think there's a lot of things that are going to be come into play, and it doesn't mean that the other things aren't important.
No, no, no,
It
no.
like, doesn't mean that taking care of our physical body isn't important. It's just not what we're focusing on in this conversation. So if we look, okay, my mother, my grandmother, my great grandmother, their aunts, sisters have breast cancer. Well, we're gonna, right? What does that? What trauma has been associated with that? What's the purpose of the breast? The breast it's part of our feminine body. The breast is also, and as you mentioned, nurture. We use it to feed our baby. So what's the purpose of that? And that's going to, when we look at that, when we explore that, we're going to be able to, okay, well, why would I have to develop a cancer? What's the purpose of the cancer? Is the cancer to help what does the cancer do? Is it in a gland that a gland enlarged? So that helps me and the glands in our breast tissue help us produce more milk. Why would my gland have to be bigger so I'm producing more milk technically, right? If we really go with it.
Yeah.
Right? Is it because there was somehow somewhere down the line there was a need for that, and that was a survival response? So that's kind of how we're going to look at it. What's the purpose of that? And there are a lot of links that have been made, which is really interesting, really fascinating. And then when we heal that, okay, we can identify it. And if we know the story, it's really helpful, right? But if we don't know the story, we can still work on it.
Yeah.
Still work on it and help, right? Okay, it's not needed anymore. That survival, that program isn't necessary, isn't needed anymore, and we can kind of work on looking at the different ways that we want to release it.
And when the mind power comes in, when we talk about mind body connection, when we can harmonize those two together and to make them work together, and not whether it is breast cancer. And I wanted to just elaborate on that to have a tangible example for people.
Yeah.
And my brain works like that. I want tangible examples too. So for me, like that, I didn't want to subscribe to that. I was like, no, that's it may be a part of the genes, but it won't, like it'll just stay there and then maybe just like dissolve with generation and in time. But not subscribing my mental mind to that illness, or
Yeah.
not subscribing to the fear of driving after having an accident, whether it's from a car or you just walking and something happens. So the mind is really, really important and is really powerful in bringing the harmony together to bring you where you want to go. And essentially, we all want to just be healthy and live a good life and be just
Yeah.
fulfilled and happy. Um, so the mind is really important. So in order to heal our physical body, there has to be a certain um, we need to understand specific things on the logical standpoint, but most of it is subconscious. And
Yeah.
as if the motivation is big enough for us to want to change, then the change can happen, right?
Can happen. Absolutely. So a lot of, right, and that point where the mind is where it needs to heal, the subconscious mind, right? That's the center of it. It's the center of it because it's the one that's responsible for our survival.
Yeah.
So everything that's happened, we need to think, where is it as survival? And I think it's important. I think one thing that for me that is important is we can have a great will to do it, but we can run into blocks. And right, that aren't necessarily because we're not strong enough or lazy or right. It's not necessarily based on that. That can be based on, right, just programs that we have that maybe we learned as coping mechanisms when we were babies or when we were kids, right? I think it's we need to kind of be gentle and compassionate with ourselves, remembering that as well. And a lot of things we don't even realize we have. For example, like we'll try to make a change. Oh, I want to do this. I want to become this. I want to learn how to do this, and we can't do it. For example, like um, what would be a good example? I want to, be more productive in my days, or I want to make this um, change in my career. We're going to run into fears or things that are, oh, I'm just repeating the same pattern over and over. Well, we have to ask ourselves, is there a reason for that maybe I'm not even aware of? It's not necessarily because I just can't do it and pushing ourselves. It's not, so I use a therapy called brain spotting that helps us. I'll tell you in a minute what it is, but
Yeah.
it helps us go into kind of our subconscious mind where all of that unprocessed trauma or coping mechanisms, right, are stored that we might not even realize they're there, and it helps our brain process them so we're able to move forward and not have that be our program anymore. So when we when we're right in our lives, when things happen like we talked about, like the car accident, for example, if that's not processed, that trauma, we're going to develop an anxiety around it. So that's going to be right a pre-programmed reaction that we're going to have. When we heal that trauma, that reaction should technically it should leave.
Mm-hmm.
Don't have that fear anymore. That can be like, that's a big example, but we're going to see that in small examples as well. So when we are able to go heal and write something that we don't even know is there, then we're able to make the changes, right? So when we say like the will to change, that's the like huge ingredient, and then removing blocks is another huge ingredient. So that's going to make that formula, right? So where healing is possible, and maybe a little and deeper.
Mm-hmm. And it's funny because as you were talking, it's like unpeeling an onion, because when
Yeah.
there's like this trauma that we want to release from our body, from our mind, but then any type of change triggers a fear response of, oh no, this I'm going into this comfort, and then it's going to be uncomfortable. And as I mentioned a little bit before we started recording, sometimes it feels like we're being just squished in a certain
Yeah.
like a little path, but then it becomes bright, and it's become it expands. So it's funny because as we're healing, it peels onions, and then like fear just keeps popping up.
Exactly. And oh my gosh, that's the perfect example. Like peeling the onion, that's absolutely what it is. Because like we think of, okay, one fear, right? Like, oh, okay. And then we move past it. Oh, and then we just we're gonna run into another one. It's inevitable. We all have it. We all have them. No one's immune to that. No one's an exception to that. Um, so okay, then there's another one. We move through that one. We move through that one. Yeah, definitely.
For you, would you say that as we're moving through and peeling the onions and shredding like these all these layers, it becomes more and more comfortable with the trajectory of the unknown, or okay, it's going to be uncomfortable for maybe like a couple days, but then I find comfort, and oh wow, this is really really nice. It's not as tight, it's more loose, and like within our body, but also the energetic part. So we're able to kind of tap into the comfort that it brings when
Yeah,
we start healing or changing.
absolutely. Absolutely. And I think we start to see after you kind of become, you've gone through the process a few times, it becomes a little bit, I think maybe it becomes more familiar and it becomes more exciting. And right, the fear, we're more familiar. Okay, this is going to be uncomfortable, but I know from my past experience that it's been better on the other side. So I'm okay with it. And some of us are more okay with that than others, right? Some people will just go for it. And that's okay. Make a change, just go for it. Okay, I'm gonna do that. They're like, right, um, just very open to change and curious about what's gonna be on the other side. They still don't know,
Mhm.
right? So I think, yeah, as we go through it, the more we do it, the easier. I think the easier it gets, the more comfortable it gets. Just the knowing, okay, right? It's like we go into that caterpillar from the butterfly over and over.
Yeah. Would you say that our transition to change will most times trigger our natural fear response? Yeah.
Absolutely. I think so. Yeah, I would say so. I would say so. Any change is any change means leaving what's comfortable, going into somewhat unknown, right? There's even if we plan everything out, it's still unknown.
Yeah.
That fear of the unknown, that unknown is a scary place, can be a really scary place until we know it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
So
think so.
going from known to the unknown, it's kind of like being chased, like a lion's chasing you, and you have to run, and you have to, but
You're not sure where you're gonna land.
yeah.
Yeah, is it gonna be better?
Yeah.
Is there gonna be another lion there?
Yeah. Am I going to be able to relax? Like,
Yeah. Is it gonna be okay? Is it going to be right? Yeah. Is it gonna be safe? Am I actually gonna be better? Are things actually gonna be better? It's scary. It's scary because no one actually knows that. No one can predict that. No one can.
no.
So yeah,
How
we
can you trust, how can you trust that where you're going is where you're meant to go and is the right path in terms of change?
in terms of change. Yeah, so I see that like as a really as a really complex thing if we really think about it.
Yeah.
For me anyways, that's where my brain goes. So if we're gonna make a change, say we're gonna move and we've had a bad experience in the past, that fear is always gonna be there because it's always going, say I'm planning on moving. At some point in my life when I was a kid, my family moved and it was a terrible situation. My brain is going to memorize that and that's going to go like in my memory bank and it's going to be kind of like, it's always going to be my instinct to, oh, is that going to be, that's because that's going to be my, it's going to be part of my reference of what happened. So that fear is going to be there. My brain has been programmed that way to have that fear around moving. Does that mean that it's not going to go well? It doesn't mean that it's not going to go well, but it means that that fear is going to be there because at some point in my life, something happened and my brain stuck to that and held on to that. So it's right. So that's going to be, yeah. So my brain kind of goes there when I think of that, right?
Yeah, no, it's perfect. I'm following you because yeah.
Yeah, like this conversation can go in so many different
ways.
directions. And I hope it there's like bits and pieces of something that's meaningful, or maybe something that, oh yeah, that makes sense. Oh my gosh, yeah, I hadn't seen it like that before, right? Or maybe, oh yeah, I agree. Like, yeah, I think that too. Or hopefully.
Yeah, well, we've touched upon many different bits, and they're all really relevant for our day-to-day life, and everything's relevant for what we're going through as humans, and as we're evolving, and with the expansion of consciousness, and like yeah, everything. It's perfect. It's all perfect because there's no right or wrong answer. There's no good or bad. It's perception, and it's what speaks to you, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. So would you have any last bits of wisdom to share with anybody in, let's say for a concrete example, somebody's going through this change right now, and I know that most people are right now. And it's really anxiety is popping up on a daily basis because certain people, like this person, knows that they need to change specific areas, whether it's professional, whether it's personal, whether it's how would you go in just giving a little bit of wisdom and information on, and reassurance, I guess, on that topic, that aspect, since we're on to change.
Yeah. I think change, it's being curious about the discomfort, kind of tuning in, okay, not judging it. So kind of like if we sit back with something and kind of ground in it, okay, I'm feeling anxiety about something. Okay, be curious about it first. When we're curious about it, it allows our mind to kind of explore a little bit. Where is this coming from? And maybe we're able to land on something. Okay, yeah, this feels familiar. Sometimes if we write about it, kind of just that stream of consciousness writing where we just write about whatever comes, it can help us in that process of curiosity, of sitting with it if we're having a certain reaction to something. Where if we stay in our thinking brain, we're going to create a lot of stories. Our imaginations are really good of creating, right? And when we're in that when those stress hormones are going, our brain is just going to go to really bad outcomes.
Yeah.
Just automatically, it's just yeah. Right. So if we sit and ground and be curious and sometimes feel it in our body, where do I feel it in my body? Oh, I feel it here. It feels tight. It feels heavy. I feel it here. I feel it. And then kind of trying to feel it in our body. Where does that feel grounded? Where do I feel grounded in my body? Let's just put that aside. Where do I feel grounded? Right? To bring those stress hormones down. That's what we're doing, right? Like physiologically in our body when we're doing that. And it can make that process a little bit more comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Be okay. Is it really that dangerous? It can help. So I think that's maybe a helpful tool to make change or make anything a little bit more comfortable. It doesn't mean that that's going to get rid of it, right?
Yeah.
But it can be it can be a helpful tool, I think, is kind of trying to remove the being, not judging it, not letting our brain go run with the stories, and trying to be more curious about it.
Mm. And with curiosity, it opens up softness, opens up compassion, opens up just this soft energy where our body needs that when we're in that stress response. Our body needs to be able to calm down for our mind to just calm down too. So that's a really important point that you mentioned. Yeah, that you pointed out. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, and I say that also realizing that, right, sometimes we need support. We need to call someone and talk to them, right? Call a friend, someone you trust, right? We need to talk things through to help ground ourselves as well. Or sometimes we need to speak with, right, with someone who's outside of the situation, where it would be like therapist, or right, so,
Mhm.
someone like that, or we need other types of right, there's that as well. So I say that knowing as well that sometimes that's just necessary, and that's okay too.
Yeah. Yeah. And people need to hear that too, that we're not meant to live alone. And finding the people that resonate with you when you do need help, it's so important because it sometimes, and my brother used this example, and I'm gonna use it too. Sometimes he said that sometimes it's like we're standing in the bottle and we can't read the label, so we need somebody outside the bottle to read the label to ourselves.
Yeah, that's a great example. I love that. Yeah, I love that example. That's
Right.
right. We need someone who has outside eyes.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
thank you, Renee. It was a pleasure to have a great conversation with you. And again, it can be like a four part conversation because we can go down different alleys and
Yeah. So many.
yeah, yeah, and the exchange that we have is it's really, really nice. So, I hope that everybody watching this really or listening resonated with either bits and pieces that we shared. Um, and I hope that you just enjoyed it. So again, thank you, Renee, and I look forward to speaking with you again.
Yes, me too. Thank you so much.
Bye.